All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Free Black Women's Library in the virtual space. My name is Ola. I am the creator and director of this project, which is multi-pronged. It includes an installation of over 3,000 books written by Black women from all over the world. And I also do this work to highlight and amplify the creativity, the brilliance, and the diversity of Black women, as well as to just kind of highlight the different ways that we are existing and thriving in the world, the expansive nature of Black womanhood, and so on and so forth. And I'm really excited today because I am talking to one of my favorite DJs on the planet, gets the party going at all times, and who also happens to be a filmmaker. Loida Limbao is here with me today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to read your bio from the Brown Girls Doc Mafia website, another awesome organization that I love. Loida Limbal is an Afro-Latina filmmaker and DJ interested in the creation of art that is nuanced and revelatory for communities of color. She is the Senior Vice President of Programs at Firelight Media. Firelight is committed to making films about pivotal movements and moments in the US Firelight's flagship program, the Documentary Lab. This is a fellowship that provides mentorship, funding, and industry access to emerging filmmakers of color. Limbaugh is currently directing. Oh, this is past news. Limbaugh has directed Through the Night, which we're talking about today, a feature film documentary about a 24-hour daycare center. And she also co-produces an amazing and iconic party it's called a party called Rosie Perez. That's uptown. Is that party still going on?
Well,
Or is
we stopped with COVID. We just did our first one in over a year, like a couple weeks ago, here in
okay?
the Bronx. We did
Okay.
one, but
Awesome,
yeah.
awesome, awesome. She is a Sundance Institute Time Warner Fellow, and she has a BA in History from Brown University, is a graduate of the Third World Newsreel Film and Video Program. She's also a former Ford Foundation Just Films Rockwood Fellow, and she lives in the Bronx with her two children. Yes. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you here. I feel like you're a representation of a lot of women I know who the new word, or maybe it's not a new word, but it's new to me, multi hyphenate, like these folks out here who are like, yeah, I'm an artist, I'm a DJ, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a dancer, I'm a performer, I'm a teacher. Like you're one of those type of folks. And I don't know if that's a symptom of living in New York City. And that's just like the way you have to be to live in New York City. You have to be doing multiple things to survive, or if it's just a certain personality type that just doesn't want to get boxed into creating in one specific way. So, I love it. I've pretty much given into it. I tried to focus on one thing for a really long time. And then I realized that wasn't me. So now I'm just doing multiple things and just taking deep breaths throughout the whole thing. But anywho, I know you're super busy I say all that to say I know you're super busy. So I appreciate you being here. And I just want to ask you how you're feeling, first of all, before we get into the film and other things. Like, how are you feeling? How's it going?
Yeah, no,
How's
thank
life?
you. Thank you for having me. And I feel I'm like happy and excited. I think one of the things I love the most is talking to Black women about Black women's work, and creative, endeavors and dreams and hopes and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to be here with you and to have this conversation. So I feel like all warm and fuzzy inside.
I love it. I love it. So let's, before we talk about the film, I want to ask you about you a little bit more. I feel like there's definitely a lot of young folks who watch my videos and kind of watch my work. They send me DMs. And I'm sure that they would be curious to know, like, how did you manage to do all the things you're doing? Like, how does that work? What was it that attracted to you to filmmaking specifically, and as well as being a DJ? Like, those are two very specific, incredible things that actually cause major influence of culture. So how did you fall into those things?
That's a great question. I would say probably like the gateway to both DJing and filmmaking was actually activism. So I grew up in New York City, and at a pretty young age started being like a young person in youth organizing programs myself. So I went through programs at places like the Point, CDC here in Hunts Point in the Bronx. Yeah, and I did a program at the Dominican Women's Development Center in Washington Heights that was like for young women. And then once I was like in my early 20s, I became, like a young adult facilitator of stuff for the younger people, and so I came up, I had the benefit, the blessing of being able to channel a lot of like what I was seeing in my neighborhood. I grew up, between Harlem, the Heights, and the Bronx. We grew up poor, dirt poor. My mother raising 4 kids by herself, making minimum wage, in New York City. And so, we experienced a lot of the hardships, right, that come along with being a Black person, being poor, in America and urban centers. And so I was like one of those kids that was like really observant, of what was going on around me. I'm also the oldest of the 4, so I was kind of like my mother's right hands, and I think maybe like became an adult before my time, because I was trying to help hold stuff together and hold things down. And I was able to kind of find in community organizing spaces like meaning and like understanding of what I was experiencing. And so, from my lived experiences, it was like, there was a kind of immediate desire to work with people that were trying to improve things, in our communities. So, and then I became part of Sister to Sister and Bushwick, which I call my most formative political home. It was the place where I learned, about Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks, and that the personal is political, and and that culture is a really powerful weapon, in sort of bringing about social change and social transformation. That it is just as important as protests, and it's just as important as, campaigns and all these other things that we have, right? And so it was through kind of that political home that I started honing, my own interests. And the DJing, I would say, came first. And the DJing, the way that came about is like, obviously I love music. I used to say like hip hop was my mother's co-parent, because it was like I had my mom and then I had hip hop growing up.
Love that. I love that. Yeah.
And we would do these fundraisers for Sister to Sister, which was a very radically feminist, womanist, woman of color space. And all the DJs all the time would be men when we were doing our parties, our fundraisers, our events. And we would say amongst ourselves, like, what a contradiction that was, and this was now 20 plus years ago. Now there are many women of color DJs in New York City who are super dope, which is great. Yeah. At that time, there were far fewer. There were some, but there were not that many. And so 3 of us kind of went in together on a pair of turntables. We were like, we love music. We love to dance. We know how to rock, we could figure out how to rock a party. Like, so we went in on these turntables and we said like, we would all learn and, help each other. And it kind of ended up being that I was the one that stuck with it. I really saw it through. So that was kind of part of the beginning of the DJing. And the more I did it, the more I loved it. It's like a very particular way of community building that is nonverbal, and then I think sometimes can like stick in a really powerful way, like it can knit people together, you know.
Truly, truly.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, and it's also obviously like, you know, a release, you know, way to have joy, experience other things, right? Than like being in our head about all the things that we are experiencing. And then with the filmmaking, around that same time in my life, kind of like my senior year. Well, actually, what happened was my junior year in college, I lived abroad in Brazil for the whole year. And while I was there, I came across a lot of amazing young people who were into hip hop and who were very clearly defining hip hop as like a movement, you know, as a movement for social change. And this is like late 90s, early 2000s, where in the US, it was like the jiggy, you know, everything flashy, right? Like
Yeah.
we had made that transition that was the only thing that hip hop could be. And being a young person myself, being a young person that loved hip hop but had experienced hip hop when it was more diverse, it could be multiple things at the same time. I felt this kind of desire to document what I was seeing in Brazil, you know, just kind of just say like, look, hip hop is more, has been more, and can continue to be more than just like this money making, you know, super greedy corporate thing that it's becoming, you know. And so it was through that, and then I connected with a friend, V Bravo. We ended up co-directing our first film together about hip hop in Latin America. So it's like, you know, activism led me both to music and to film in this, you know, interesting way.
That's awesome. And a couple of things came to mind when you were speaking. One of them being like the importance of those organizations like that and how they can really shape a life, right? So, you know, hopefully spaces like that still exist and are able to thrive even amongst this pandemic. I know that my daughter's in an organization that she's been part of for a long time since she was like 12 and now she's 19. And yesterday, and now she's a youth leader. She's facilitating workshops. She led a like a action yesterday about defunding the police. And it's just kind of interesting to see her go through that process and that cycle of becoming more and more activated and becoming more and more like figuring out ways how she can use her creativity to plug in. So God bless community organizations, right? Especially,
Absolutely.
especially the ones that are free and in the hood, quote unquote, because they can really save a life.
Yeah. And
So
yeah, and I also
yeah,
think like, you know, I believe that like the people that are most impacted by a problem are the ones that are in the best position to change it, to solve it, to shift it.
yeah,
And young people are always at the forefront of change, you know, so it's like anything that is investing, right, in like the young people that are most disproportionately impacted by all the oppression in this country, that's the best kind of investment you can make, you know. That's a
for
sure shot. That's a sure bet, you know.
real, for real. That's a fact. That's a fact. And when you were, you know, little baby Loida with your first turntables, did you ever imagine that you would become like this iconic DJ? Like, did you dream about that in your mind or?
Oh, and I definitely don't think of myself as an iconic DJ. I see myself as like, you know, just a cultural worker, you
Yeah,
know, trying
yeah.
to reflect back to us the way that I see us, which is
Mhm.
like so grand. And I'm eternally like, I'm in love with us and I'm fascinated by us. And I just want to create works in the world that embody that, right? Like that have that ethos and that energy to kind of give that back to us.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Awesome, awesome. Well, let's talk about Through the Night a little bit. I would like to show the trailer
Mhm.
and then we'll talk about it. So let me share my screen. Do, 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 do. Is this the right? No, that's not it. Hold on one second.
I'm gonna mute myself so I don't hear the traffic going by while you're watching the trailer.
For real. Here we go. Mm-mm.
Come on, mama, time to get up. Morning, baby. Noah, time to get up. I've been doing this for 22 years. I have all different types of families in my daycare. I have some that comes in at 6 o'clock in the morning that works to 8:30 at night. I have some that comes from 3:30 to 12:30 at night. I have some that comes in overnight. I see a lot of parents come in and break down. They don't want to do this, but they need to work and take care of their families. See you later. All right, baby, have a good day. Be careful. This is the way the world is set up at this point.
I never really thought of overnight childcare till I had to use it.
I've been working 7 days for almost 2 months. If I'm not working one job, I'm working another job. Hi, Mommy.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Love you guys very much. It's not just a job. Turn your sheet over. This is really our life. My children, ever since they was the age of 2 years old, they had to share me with other children. I remember my children saying, Mommy, why do they have to come first?
Mommy!
As parents, you make sacrifices. It's not their fault. So I just do what I can. It's not easy, but eventually I'll sleep.
Do we love each other?
Yeah.
I didn't hear you.
Yeah.
Do we love each other? It's okay.
Then you have to be careful. If you continue to have down this, you need surgery.
This work is hard. I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing because I feel like if I lay down, I'm so tired I might not get back up.
Whew. Wow. So beautiful. It says Through the Night is a documentary film love letter to child care providers and single mothers. It is a tender portrait of titanic strength, love, and selflessness that follows 3 working mothers whose lives intersect at a 24-hour daycare center. It has been featured in the New York Times, Hollywood Reporter, Variety's 2021 Best Documentary Oscar predictions list. Incredible. And it is currently streaming on PBS until June 9th. Woo, this film, yo, I I was in my emotions watching this film for multiple reasons. I'm a single mother, so I can relate to the moms in the film and the struggles they go through. And I was also a childcare provider for years. I worked for 2 daycare centers, one, actually 3, oh my gosh. One of them, we accepted babies as young as 3 months, which like shocked me on my first day when I walked in and I saw the room with the cribs. I was like, I can't even imagine. And the other ones were like ages 2 to 5. And it was really emotionally nurturing work. I love working with children, especially that age. They're really fun. It's a lot of labor, but it's also very nurturing. But yeah, I love this film. I just want to congratulate you for making this film, for finishing it, because I know that to finish a film is so much. It's one thing to have an idea and then to go into production and then to shoot it and then to edit it and then to get the credits and then to put it out. It's a lot. So first of all, congratulations on getting all of that done. And also on the success of it and how well it's been received, which is so beautiful to see. So yeah, I have a bunch of questions for you about it, but what inspired you to make this movie, for one?
Yeah, I learned, so this particular daycare, Nunu and Patrick's daycare, I read about actually in an article that was talking about labor in the United States, basically. And I was talking about how, like, in the United States, more and more people have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, how those jobs sometimes or often require irregular hours or overnight hours. You know, people's schedules are getting set by algorithms that don't care that you have a 3-year-old or an 89-year-old at home that needs your care. Like, the algorithms do not care, right? And so the article was sort of posing the question of, given that reality of work in the United States, who looks after people's children? And then they profiled the daycare and a few of the parents that rely on Nunu and Patrick. And when I was reading the article, I felt like I was reading my mother's story, because she raised, you know, like I said earlier, there's 4 of us, and she was a home health aide, making minimum wage, working the night shift. And so I was like, yo, this is crazy. This is like, I'm reading about people that I don't know, but their reality is so similar to my mother's. And then I was like, you know, I'm 42, so my mother was raising me, you know, 30 something years ago, and so little has changed 30 plus years later. And then I was like, well, that's because we don't really talk about this. You know, and we certainly don't talk about it in its full complexity. So of course it's not going to change, right? Because it's this thing that is hiding in plain sight. It is so many people's reality, but we are not centering it nearly enough. We don't talk about it because, you know, the people that it disproportionately impacts is women of color, poor women of color, right? Working class women of color. And this country does not care, right, about these people. And sometimes our movements don't really, you know, they fail to center this experience as well. So for me, that, you know, all those kinds of thoughts and all the emotions of kind of being like thinking of myself at 9, at 7, and remembering my mother and what we were going through, I was like, this would make a great film. Like, we need this film, right? Like, my mother hasn't seen a film about her lived experience. You know, she's in her late 60s. Like, the women in this article haven't seen a film about themselves, like, you know, and I'm a single working mother too. You know, my situation is different than my mother's. You know, I was able to go to college. I make, you know, a better wage than my mother ever did. But I also know the kind of the isolation that's like really specific to the experience of single motherhood. And yeah. Yeah,
It's so real. It's so real.
It's a real thing, you know. And so I was like, I gotta make this film. That it just, you know, was like had my whole spirit and body buzzing. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the fact that as the person who made the film, you're directly connected to the community that's being highlighted. The story that's being told is a story that you can relate to, because sometimes I find when it comes to documentaries portraying certain stories, the people behind the camera aren't necessarily like you know, they have good intention as far as like wanting to show a story, but they don't really understand what it is that they're sharing. And I felt that in your film. Like, I felt that you were connected to the people. Like, I appreciate the humanity, right? And the complications, you know, the fact that the people who are doing this work, they actually love this work. Like, they're not complaining about it being too much work. They love it, but you know, it's not valued enough in this society. Like that, like the issue is not so much the work, it's the value that's placed on it and how it's seen, right? And you just captured it really well. I'm curious to know how the people, like, how did you get them to be so open and, you know, honest on camera, just like telling all their business? How'd you get to do that? That was amazing.
Yeah, so there's a funny, I'll answer that, but there's like a funny tangent about, so I read that article and then I reached out to a woman who had worked on the article that I actually knew because we went to college together. And I told her, listen, I work in documentary film. I would love to meet these folks, see if they'd be open to collaborating on a film. And she actually said that she didn't feel comfortable making the introduction, that she had, sort of, that she felt like they were very kind of cautious and guarded while they had been working on the article. So she didn't think that they'd be open, to a film. And she didn't feel comfortable brokering the introduction. I said, okay. And then I took her no, for an answer. I was like, okay, well, I tried, guess not. And I think too, because I was trying to like talk myself out of the idea, because I was already working a full-time job and my kids at that point were really young. I started, like, the whole thing started maybe like 6 years ago. So my oldest was 4, and my youngest was like 2.5 years old. So I was like, I don't have no business trying to make a film on top of everything that, I'm going through and have on my plate. So I was like, she said no, I tried, okay. Whew, relief, like that lets me off the hook. But the thing the idea wouldn't leave me alone. I would find myself like doing dishes and thinking about these stories, and I'd be like, if I were working on the film, I would want to shoot this and I would want to make sure to capture that. And it'd be important, like we should shoot pinwheels so that you get like the children's perspective. And I was like, creating,
Yes.
even though I wasn't working on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this happened for 2 years until I finally was like, okay, this thing is not going to leave me alone. Clearly, I have to do something with this. And so I cold called them 2 years later and spoke to Nuno that first day that I called and, said like, this is who I am. I work in film. I'd be interested in doing this for this reason. Would you take a meeting with me? And she said, let me talk to my husband. I'll call you back. And so she called me back a few days later. I went up and met her. And from that first meeting, we spent a few hours together. We had like a lot to talk about. There was a real natural rapport. And she said, yes, from that very first meeting, like, let's do this. Tell me what you need. And I remember telling her, like, I am willing to follow any rules, any parameters that you all need to set to make sure that everybody feels safe and comfortable.
Nice.
One, because that matters to me, but also because these are people's children, which is extra delicate, right? Like requires an extra level of care. And I kind of kept saying that to her throughout the conversation. And at the end of the conversation, when I went to say it again, she was like, she said, look, baby girl, I'm looking at you in your eyes. I've been around the block a few times. I can tell who you are. I'm not worried. So you tell me what you need and we'll figure it out. And I was like, damn.
Wow.
And, like, it's, it made me just think about like having taken somebody else's no for an answer, and it's okay. I think it worked out. I probably needed that time to pass for other things in my life to get sorted, to actually be able to do the thing, so I don't have any regrets, but it was just like a real lesson, it's like our folks want to tell their stories, but they want to tell their stories in ways that they feel like safe and respected, and not like being picked apart and judged and studied, to your point about like, sometimes documentaries are really well-intentioned, right? They want to shine a light on something that needs, to be exposed or discussed or, whatever. But I think oftentimes when it's someone that's outside of the particular community, they themselves are trying to understand the issue. And in the issue, they miss the humanity of the people, and also I think that in documentary film, the default audience that people have in mind for their films is like a white liberal, middle class educated audience. So they're trying to like explain for these people. And for me, I'm making the film. I was making the film for Nunu. I was making it for my mother. I was making it for Shanona. I was making it for the people in it. For the people that raised me who are like the women in it, for my homegirls. Now I was making it for myself. So I didn't feel like I had to explain anything. Like, we know what our what our reality is. So I was really thinking about what the experience would feel like for us watching the film,
Yes. Oh my God, yes. Wow, you've made so many good points. I'm just like sitting here writing notes because I have to like write everything down because I don't want to forget. A couple of things you said that I really want to make sure that people take from this conversation, if they take anything from it. One of them is the not taking the no becoming a yes, but also like listening to your gut and just like paying attention, not ignoring that voice, like whether it be in your mind or your gut or your heart or whatever. But when you have an idea, right, and it just won't leave you alone, whether there's like a barrier, whether there's like whether it involves like taking a risk and putting yourself out there in a way that may not make sense to anyone, maybe not even yourself. It's just sometimes like you plot and you plan and you dream. I call it like freedom dreaming, right? You just plan and you just like, you conjure and you picture these things in your mind and you make notes, and you just got to go for it. At some point, you just got to go for it, and just, because that's pretty much how like the whole library thing started with me. Like, I had the idea for the Free Black Women's Library for about 2 years before I did anything. I was like, this sounds weird, like a traveling book installation. What do it just didn't make sense. And then I got nervous because I was like, books by Black women only. How are people going to feel about that? Does that sound like separatist or, it just, and then eventually I said, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to put this out there and see what happens. And it developed beyond what I imagined. So, I always like to encourage people, like, if you have an idea, just, plot and plan and conjure and dream. And after a while, just go for it and just go for it. So, I really applaud you going for your dream. And one of the things that one of the other things you said about the story and the conversation with her is how you created like those very specific boundaries, and you let it be known that she is the person that will be guiding this process. Like, her voice is what matters. And I think that really comes through because we get to see her in so many ways. Like, we get to see her being funny, with her husband, just like being really cute and flirty. We get to see her tired. We get to see her just like working, doing her thing. And she's just telling her story. Her going to the doctor and dealing with like the physical effect of the work she does, like how that plays itself out. Another part I found relatable. But also like the moms. How did you speak to the moms as well? Did you have that same conversation with them? And how did that go? Because their truth is very revealing as well. And they're very vulnerable and very open and very honest, and just like, it is what it is. So I'm curious, like, what did you get the same response from them that you got from Nunu, or how did that work out?
Yeah, so the moms, once I had I had a couple conversations with Nunu after that first one to just kind of like drill down. I was trying to like paint as much of a picture for her of what the journey would be like, because also like if you've never worked in film, you have no idea. Like when somebody shows up like, I want to make a documentary about, yeah, sure, cool, but you have no sense what that means. And then we were talking about like themes and things we wanted to touch on and explore in the film. I gave her like my list of things I had been thinking about. She had her own list of things. And for her, one of the key reasons that she wanted to make the film, you know, and I'll use her words, is like, she was like, I want the world to know what my mothers are going through, you know, because people criticize my mothers and are real quick to pass a lot of judgment, but they haven't walked them out in their shoes. And so I want that to be seen and to be known. So there was, you know, huge alignment there because that was one of my goals too. And then based on that, she identified a few families that she thought could be, you know, potential collaborators, you know, to people to feature. And she kind of gave me like 4 families to talk to. And what ended up happening was that Marisol and Shanona were the 2 that I first was like able to connect with, because also you got to think like all these people are working around the clock. So just like being able to connect and carve out time was difficult. And Marisol was enthusiastic, you know, about wanting to share, you know, what her current sort of journey was looking like. And for me, her, you know, her story was really important because she was like the living example of people that are literally working multiple jobs because their employers, you know, won't give them full-time hours because they don't want to pay for benefits or this or whatever. But you know, you got people jumping through all kinds of crazy hoops, you know, and so I was like, that's great. If you're down, like, this is wonderful. And then with Shanona was the second mother that I spoke with, who I thought was really equally important because Shanona is a pediatric ER nurse. You know, she's a professional. She has a good paying job. But she's working too much and she's a single mother, you know, and there's like this other dimension, right, to the experience and the isolation and the lack of support and the guilt and all that stuff that I felt like could just really add a lot of dimension. Because I also think like when people tell stories about the hood, our communities, poor people, working class people, they flatten, right? Like who lives in our communities? Our communities are really like complex, you know, and there's this range of socioeconomic, you know, situations and things within, you know, our communities that is nuanced. And I think that for me was an important thing to bring, you know, to the conversation. And Shanona, you know, was also, you know, open to, I felt like, you know, she, from our first conversation, she was like, yeah, I can do this, you know, let's do this. I think this is important. So, you know, I was like, all right, so if y'all are down, like you both cover a lot of ground, you know, with your life stories. And then what I did with both of them was just like, kind of just like wore my heart on my sleeve and shared a lot about what I was going through, you know, and what my mother had gone through so that they had a sense of where I was coming from, you know, not just like I'm coming from the Bronx, but this is my experience and this is why I'm so invested in this is because I really like care, you know, and I'm going through this. I'm kind of making the film for myself as well. You know, there was a part of it that was about wanting to understand like how the hell it is that we do what we do, you know, under these conditions. Like, yeah. I think I just kind of needed to bear witness to other mothers doing it, accomplishing, failing, you know, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, forgiving themselves, having somebody else forgive them, like going through all of that to kind of process my own stuff, you know? Yeah, so that's how that piece with the mothers came together. It was like, if I'm asking you about your business, I gotta tell you my business. It's only fair.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I love it. And what have the moms said to you in regards to the film now that it's out? How do they feel about it?
Yeah, so Marisol, so as part of the release, like we've really wanted to have them all be like a part of not just like the events, but informing how we release the film, and like what we use the film for. I would say Nuno and Patrick are the most actively involved, because they were already activists, to begin with. So they're like about it, and then Marisol has participated in some things when she is at the daycare, but other than that, she's like off working. And then Shanona went back to school, so she's working and in school, so she's been less involved. Yeah. But
doing it. I said these women are doing it.
Yeah, and Marisol, I remember when we first showed them the film, they were like all together. I remember Marisol, the first thing that she said was like, wow, I really didn't understand my value back then. And she was talking about the scene in the film where she goes for a job interview and has the awkward conversation about salary.
Yeah.
And she was just like reflecting like, wow, I really didn't understand my value. And like, I'm so glad I'm not in that place anymore. So she was just kind of like taken over by like, the reflection of herself,
Yeah, her own growth.
Yeah.
That's good to know. And I remember watching that scene and understanding like how she felt, because I've been there, I've been in that position where it's just like, whatever the job is, I'll take it. I just want to make enough so I can pay these fucking bills. Like,
yeah.
And it's like going on those interviews and just sitting there like, just hire me already, like, enough with the song and dance. I'm here to work. So I'm glad that things are going better for her. And I saw an interview with Nuno and Patrick where Nuno was talking about how, like, the first time she saw the film, one of the first thoughts that she had was she didn't realize that she did so much because she's so busy doing it. And I could see that because she's like growing food in the garden, working on the computer, buying gifts for the kids, sweeping the floor, doing hair, making like just going.
Yep.
And that's, to me, that is such a like tenet of single motherhood, is you don't even know, like, you're in the midst of like washing dishes or cooking, but at the same time you're like responding to homework questions, and you're also looking through your fridge, plotting out what's going to be for lunch for the kids the next day. And you're looking at the clothes like, okay, those jeans are worn out, I'm gonna have to figure out how to buy you some new jeans, and maybe I'll plan a swap next month with the other moms so that we can kind of like trade clothes. Like, it's nonstop. It's
nonstop. And you don't really have anyone that's like, let me take something off your plate, which like the absence too of care, for you as a single mother, when you're like handing out all this care, you're constantly caregiving, but you never get it in return, or you'll get very little in return, not necessarily from your children, but like just in general, right? That's like one of the things to me that I feel like is like a question, it's like what, like this compulsion, right? Like for people who do answer this call of mothering, which I also, I think when you were talking about the Free Black Women's Library, you were talking about Black womanhood in its most expansive sort of, definition. Like, I see mothering as work that many people can do in many different kinds of bodies. And it certainly extends beyond the biological, beyond the nuclear family, beyond all of that. And so for me, like, for people to answer this call to do this very particular kind of labor, this work of mothering, like, how the fuck do we do it when, you're like giving, but you don't get very much in return? It's unsupported, I'm fascinated by that. And then not to like romanticize it. Like I really want to understand the ins and out, and I want to understand like what the experience feels like, you know, for those of us that are going through it, you know.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's something that fascinates me as well. You know, single motherhood and how it's framed in society as kind of like a flaw and a mistake and like a burden on society, when in actuality, I feel like nobody works harder than we do. And nobody gets paid less than we do for the work we're doing, right? I see a lot of conversations that really put us down and make it seem like we are the biggest mistake.
Sore.
Yeah.
We're like a sore, you know, a lesion.
Yeah, and I find it really disturbing and sometimes really aggravating. Like I get a little bit angry because people aren't making babies alone, you know, and there's this cliche that is like overdone about it takes a village to raise a child. And I'm like, everybody knows that. Like everybody knows that it takes more than one person or even two people to raise a kid, but yet they're angry that people are raising kids alone. Like we don't choose to do this, right? And one of the things that stuck out to me in the film was when Shanoa
Shanona.
Nona said something like, "What is rest?" And I said, "Yeah, what is it?" I want to know. Like, I'm just starting, like, now that my daughter is 19, I'm just starting to like understand what rest means. But I really don't think I knew what that was before. You know, like people talk about, oh, take a nap or, you know, go for a walk. When?
What?
When is that happening? So when she said that, I was like, I feel you, girl. Like, what is that? Like, what does that mean exactly? Like, sleep is just part of the schedule of life, and it's not necessarily a thing to be like luxuriated in and enjoyed. It's just like practical. Like, eventually you need to sleep because you're tired. But you know, I wonder, because I think a lot about community care and collective care as well. And I wonder what systems, what cultural ideas can we put in place to kind of like shift this, you know, shift this energy so that raising children, taking care of children, and being a mother is something that doesn't feel like endless labor, and also feels like supported, you know. And I wonder if there were systems in place back in the days before colonization, you know. I haven't done enough research, but I know that the idea of a woman raising kids alone is not something, it's something that probably would have seemed really strange to our ancestors, right? So I think about like, what is it that what systems can we put in place so that women feel more supportive and so that children aren't just looking to this one specific person for all the care and all the love they need.
Yeah, I think I was hearing somebody talk about the nuclear family and like the advent of that as like the standard, you know, or the ideal, which is fairly recent actually. I forget exactly when that came about, but I almost want to say it was like during one of the world wars, you know.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, so please nobody quote me, but I know it's a fairly recent thing, and it was like tied to industrialization and, you know, like in capitalism, right? Everything is tied to like, how can you make more money? How can you make profit? Not necessarily what is more humane and what serves human beings. And I think, you know, I think about one of the things that needs to happen in order for us to be able to create better systems is almost like redefining, re-signifying this experience of single motherhood. because it's like, especially if you're a Black single mother, we're living under like the shadows of the welfare queen stereotype, right? And also like crack era, crack babies, strung out mothers. So the experience is criminalized, like the status of being a Black single mother, it has been criminalized in our psyche. So we are living, right, with the effects of that. If you think about, for example, for you to get a voucher for childcare, the agency that you go through is the Agency for Children's Services. These are the same people that remove children from homes, right? So it's like the very same people. It's all like this experience of being criminalized, and then because we're living under these like shadows, we all, it's like within our communities, we end up harming each other over like respectability stuff. Like you're saying, like the image is that, we are like what's wrong, we're the problem, like we're the reason that there's problems in our communities, because all these women are raising kids by themselves, and all the stuff that you hear, right? Like,
So bad. I've heard
it's like terrible
things about single mothers. Like it shocks me. It shocks me.
There's like a vitriol, like a specific kind of hate for Black single mothers. Like, it's really specific, and it's like well honed, and it falls into this thing. And I think like we have to re-signify and redefine that experience for us, even ourselves, to even like break out of the shame and the stigma and the isolation that sometimes we reproduce and self-impose, because we are embarrassed, because we believe that we are supposed to be able to do it by ourselves. And if we can't, something's wrong with us. It's a shortcoming of ours, so then we can't ask for help, and people don't think to offer us help because they're looking at us like we're some kind of eyesore on the community. So there's a narrative, that needs to be like just completely interrupted and shifted, and that's part of what the film is trying to do. It's like, actually, what we are doing is, and then I think a lot about movement spaces and the kinds of things that we have centered, as like focal points, and we tend to respond a lot to violence. Like when violence is inflicted upon our community, we respond to that, right? And that becomes, these become these kind of openings for mass participation and mass movement and things like that. As it should be, right? And a lot of that in recent years has been around police violence, police murders, right? We've had a lot of movement too around like the criminal justice system. But I think there are these other kinds of violences that affect women and femmes that we don't call violence. It doesn't even register for us as violence. And then we never even think about it, and I think about like the violence of racial capitalism and the particular ways that affects families, and particularly single mothers, and it's very brutal. It's very violent. Nobody in the film, can sleep more than 3 to 4 hours a night. And we live in this country where we've normalized it. We normalize it so much that we don't even talk about it. Like where we act like, sleep is some kind of luxury or some privilege that needs to be earned. Like sleep is a basic human right. Like as a human being, you need sleep, you need water. Like there's some basic things that you need, right, in order to sustain a life. And we're not talking about that. We are all comfortable and accustomed to being able to go to the supermarket at 12 a.m. or to Target or to the hospital whenever we need to, with no kind of acknowledgement of the people that provide these services and what their needs are, and our movements, I think, sometimes have not been able to build kind of like an umbrella that is wide enough to fully center the things that mainly impact Black women, you know, and Black femmes in our community. So for me, I think that there's work there, you know, like at least as a filmmaker, I think a lot about like imagination, and what we imagine, what we're able to imagine precedes what we're able to create. Like we need to be able to dream it and imagine it. And so I'm in that space a lot, you know, of how do I help nurture our imagination so we can be asking for more, demanding for more, being more radical, thinking beyond what they tell us, you know, what these fucked up systems tell us is possible, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for real. For real. I'm definitely in that same space with you. You know, I maintain a sense of like optimism and a sense of belief that we have the capability to create new systems of care, right? New systems of care, not just for single mothers, but for the people within our communities that are suffering the most harm and dealing with the most violence. So I feel you on that. And I feel you also on film being a really powerful medium to help to like get people to dream along with you, right? When people see those visuals, I'm sure there are people out there who've seen this film on PBS who are like, wow, like I didn't even know there was such a thing as a 24-hour daycare, right? And the fact that somebody, you know, needs somebody to take care of their child from like 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning. That is a very specific thing that I know a lot of people, because even when I was working in daycare, pickup time was 6 o'clock. Like we went home at 6.
Yep.
So, you know, the idea of a mom dropping off her child at 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and picking them up in the morning is something that I'm sure is new to many people. And I like that you highlighted that in ways that were really touching and really beautiful. Like it wasn't traumatic, right? It was just like, wow, okay, so that's what's going on in the world, in this country, in society. Good to know. And I like that you gave, you know, all the stories that were told in people's own voices. Like there was no narrator. I guess I'm kind of going into the technical aspect of the film a little bit. Like there was no narrator, there were no like random stats thrown out and all that dry kind of stuff. It was just very much like we hear the mom's voice, we hear the kid's voice, we hear Patrick's voice, we hear the care person's voice, the end. And I really love that. So was that like a purposeful decision? And maybe you can talk a little bit about like, how do you make those technical choices when you're making a documentary, as far as like the sound and the visuals and the editing and things like that?
Yeah, it was definitely deliberate. I was like, we don't need any outside like experts. We don't need a scholar, you know, or a journalist to come in. You know, the people who are living this experience are the experts. And again, I was like making it for us. So I feel like we speak best to ourselves, you know, it's like what is most relatable, you know, is like, you know, for me, if I'm somewhere and I hear somebody that, you know, I could tell like grew up in the Bronx, I'm like automatically like, it's a different way of me listening. I'm going to lean in a different way, right? Because I know you have a particular experience, and we all do that, regardless of where we come from, right? Everybody does that. So I felt like them speaking in their own voices about their lives made the most sense. And in terms of making the choices along the way, I think I started out with a couple of premises and goals and things that I was interested in, like, you know, creative muscles that I was interested in flexing. You know, I was trying to challenge myself artistically. So there were some things that I set out, you know, to do that were of my own, just kind of artistic interest. And then I think the final film became a negotiation between the things that I was interested in kind of exploring different storytelling techniques and editing approaches and things like that, with that being shaped and informed by like what the footage itself actually was telling me it wanted to be or it needed to be. And so I'll give you an example. Like the whole team that worked on the film was an all women of color team. We only had one man on the team who was a black man who was the composer. And my editor, huh?
I said the music was so nice.
Yeah, he killed. Osei killed it. It's really. He's amazing. I can't say enough. I mean, everybody that I also have to say, like all of our collaborators, our DP, Naiti Games, it was amazing, and my editor Malika Zuhali Warao, who is Brooklyn based. She was like my main collaborator the whole time I was working on the film, and the collaborations were amazing, and I'm a little bit scared to like make another film if I can't work with the same team, because I'm like, these people spoiled me.
Yeah,
because it was challenging. I feel like I grew by leaps and bounds as a filmmaker, but I always felt safe and held by them, you know. So I'm like, this is the only way I want to work, you know. So yeah, but like there were times where we wanted to, you know, try like different formal approaches, and we wanted to do this, and we wanted to manipulate like this, and we wanted to maybe like put this filter to create some sort of evocative, you know, whatever on the footage. And at times it was like the footage would be like, no, like, and that's too much. That's not what I don't want to take that shape. I want to be something else, or I need to be something else, you know? And so we had to pull back, and we'd have to like negotiate with the footage, you know, like, come on, girl, work with me. I really want to go here. Like, try this hairstyle with me. And the footage be like, nah, I'm not feeling that. You're not going to put me in no blue hair, you know, like, nah. So it was a dance, you know. It's like sometimes how you can like over fertilize or over treat, you know, different plants and plant life and whatever. Like you go overboard, you overwater the thing, you know. I feel like I had that kind of experience working with the footage. So the final product was like us and the footage,
yeah.
You know, pushing back on us.
Yeah, I love that metaphor of the footage is like a living thing that you have to work with, because it is a material, you know, just like paint to a painter, you know, it's a material, and you do have to kind of like work with it and shape it in the way that it's asking you to shape it. So I appreciate that metaphor a lot. You know, there's so many different moments in the film as far as like where the camera's placed that just feel like really intentional. And there's this kind of dance that takes place where the kids are kind of like spinning around and they're playing, and the little things are everywhere. Excuse me. And I also really love the shot of when you see the wall and you see all of the children that Nunu and Patrick have taken care of over the decades, and like so many children. And I just imagine like these two people have been a part of shaping and creating so many other people. And there's like this domino effect, because I think about how that further, you know, just like you being a little baby activist and becoming like a filmmaker and a DJ, like those kids going on to become the things that they become. And, you know, you think people might say, oh, this person, oh, they just take care of toddlers, or they just take care of kids, but they're actually doing cultural work and shaping the community.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think of them as an institution. Like they're an institution, like the church is an institution in a community. I mean, we don't talk about them in that way, which is part of the problem, right, of how undervalued this work is, but its impact is no less important and profound, you know. And so I think it's like, let's actually value, right, like the things that have real value. You know, there's something that there's something that actually you're not, I don't know if you're gonna remember this, but I think we were on a panel, or you were on a panel. This was a long time ago, that the Caribbean Cultural Center put together. It was a long, long time ago. I feel like it was like at Hunter or something. I don't know if I was on the panel or if I had just been on a panel. Anyway, I was there, and I think the conversation was about healing, and the importance of healing work and community spaces and community organizing. And I remember at one point, you kind of like, you know, scrunched up, you made up your face, you know, you were like looking at the other people on the panel. You're like, okay. Yes, it's important to heal, but, and I'm paraphrasing, but it stuck with me. You said it's important to heal, it's important to have an emphasis on it, but it's also important to know that we are whole, even as we're healing, because sometimes we could get like, you know, so focused on healing as this place that we're going to arrive at, you know, at some magical point, right? And lose sight of all that we are already, and all that we are in the present, you know? And so it's like, yeah, heal, but also like you're whole, you know, even with your issues and your traumas and whatever. And it was, that really like stuck with me. And it's something that in the context of this conversation came back up, because like, yes, we're up against a lot, right? And we face a lot of violence and brutality from all sorts of angles in our communities. And there is a way in which I think like Nunu and Patrick's daycare is one of many examples of we are already living our futures. We're already living the solutions that we're like looking for.
Yes.
And we have to see these things as such, you know, and give them their proper value. And it's like, we have to remind ourselves that like, we are here. We have kept ourselves alive. Nobody else has kept. So like, we already have the solutions. We're already living this utopic future of care that we, you know, yearn for. Like we've kept ourselves alive by caring for each other through, you know, hundreds of years of a campaign of genocide against our people. Displacement, migration, slavery, colonization, war, you know, all these things. And we are still here. They can't get rid of us, you know? So it's like, like, yes, there's a future, the solutions that we're, you know, striving for, and we're actually already living the solutions. Like Nunu and Patrick's daycare is like, it's a model. We could replicate that model on a local level for other members of our communities that have other different kinds of care needs. You know, they're already a blueprint for us, you know?
Yes. You're getting me excited. Excited because, I vaguely remember that. And I remember saying that because I think at that time, I don't know if it's the case in 2021, but there was a moment in time where there was such a focus on healing within the Black community. It was starting to get really like, you know, I felt like it was kind of pushing forward this narrative that there was something really wrong with us. Like, you know, like, oh, we need to heal ourselves. We need to heal. And I'm like, we're not sick. We're not damaged. We're not ill. We're not broken. Like,
we're not broken. Yeah.
You know,
we're not broken.
You know, and we have, like you said, we have systems of care within our community, and they just need to be highlighted, right? So I'm actually created a list that I call Systems of Collective Care. So I'm gonna read it to you, and then you can you can tell me which one of these have you, I call them collective care strategies. Which one of these have you've encountered, and as far as like has helped you or you've been a part of, if you feel like sharing. And there's 10 of them. So the first one is mutual aid, childcare cooperatives, time banking, sliding scale healthcare, crowdfunding campaign, barter and trade of goods and services, food pantry or free meal program, free stores or being part of a Buy Nothing group, CSA, community supported agriculture. And the last one is volunteer corps, and that could be an ambulance, transportation services, legal aid, or security services.
Yeah, I mean, definitely mutual aid. Been on both sides of it, like, receiving it and organizing it for other people, and contributing to it for other people in different ways, right? Like from services for people to money, for people, the range of it. Childcare. I haven't been a part of a childcare co-op specifically, but daycare, home-based daycare centers. You said free pantry and food stuff. Yes, I grew up on government cheese. I forget, now I'm like forgetting all the other ones, but they were like, I feel like there were at least like 5 or 6 on there that I was like, yes, 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 yes. Time barter, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm interested in really highlighting like the different collective care strategies that Black folks, poor folks, people of color have been a part of, and have been a part of like their survival and also like their thriving. These things that have kept us together for hundreds of years throughout all those things that you named. Racism, segregation, violence, police brutality, et cetera, et cetera.
One that I would want to add, because it's like something I saw my mother do.
Oh yeah.
Was I don't know how you would phrase this in like a simple thing, but just like letting people stay with you, like taking people in, because growing up, there were several points growing up where we had a woman, and maybe like a woman with a kid or two, either from our family or from our extended community, who was trying to get out of a domestic violence situation, who stayed with us.
Word.
And my mother did that like time and time again. And then, there were friends of ours, like my mother's kids, who had, violence going on in their home. One of my sister's closest friends was in foster care and, bounced around a lot. We took in those young people, and they stayed with us, sometimes weeks, months at a time, enough to provide some care, for them in a moment of crisis, or sometimes just to buy time to figure out some other solutions. So we had people staying, women. We had adult women and young women in different moments of crises in their lives staying with us. And mind you, we were in a constant crisis ourselves in my house, but it's like, we're gonna be hungry together, like,
period.
But no one's gonna harm you here. Here's my shoulder. You can cry on my shoulder. I'm gonna hold you. I'm gonna go with you to the next doctor's appointment.
That's right. Yes.
I'm gonna translate for you or whatever you need. Yeah.
It's all about that harm reduction. 100%. 100%. Yeah.
I would say, like, I learned about solidarity not in my political spaces. I learned about what solidarity is through seeing my mother model it, my whole life.
Yeah. That's what I say. I'm like, it's no theory over here. This is practice.
Facts.
This is life. This is not, like, I'm all about Black feminist theory. I read it all day, every day. But actual praxis is like the things I'm living and experiencing, and the things that like my friends and my comrades and my community are out here just making ways out of what might look like no way, making multiple ways. 100%. 100%. Wow. Yeah. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I think I have like 2 more questions. Talk to me about how you feel about the response that this film is getting. Like, it's been getting a lot of really good press. And it seems like it's, on its way to winning some awards, which is really cool. Like, how does that feel?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this goes back to what you were saying about earlier, like if you have an idea, something that won't leave you alone, to follow it. Because this process for me began 6 years ago. I could have never imagined in a million years that one, I was going to finish the thing. That was actually my biggest fear, was not being able to finish it and failing all these people that I had made promises to. But that it would be done and ready for release at the beginning of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
The film's world premiere, in air quotes, was Tribeca 2020, which didn't happen. The festival got postponed because it was April in New York City of 2020 when we were, in the thick of it. My own mother was in the hospital with COVID at one point, in April. And that for the film industry, like everything else, just upended. There were no film festivals in person. You couldn't do screenings in person, right? Like everything had to be virtual. It was unprecedented. How do you do this? And in the first moment, I really panicked. I was like, oh my God, my film's just gonna get lost. Nothing's gonna happen. Oh. No one's going to be able to see it. I don't even know how to try to get people to see it. Everybody's dying around us, right. Quite literally. My film doesn't even matter because everybody's dying, what even matters at this, all of that, right? Like being in that space, and then now being a year and change later. And like you're saying, it has reached audiences. It has gotten really great reviews, and it's resonating with people. It's talk about surrender, right? And just having faith. If you are pursuing what it is that you're meant to pursue, and that's purpose. And when you are aligned with purpose, that road will always lead to things that you could never have imagined. So I kind of think about it that way. None of this I could have, foreseen. It certainly has done better and more than I thought. This kind of, this film is it's really subtle. It's very quiet. It's not
very subtle.
There's no big, and that's not the forte of American cinema, and it's certainly not the forte of American documentary filmmaking. So I was worried that the film might not even register just because it's not of the tone that, is the tone of the moment, Right. So it's definitely done a lot more than what I thought was possible for a quiet, subtle film about working class Black and Latina women, so I'm very thankful. And in some ways, I feel like it came out when it needed to come out, because we are having these different kinds of conversations about care because of the pandemic, so I think it kind of hit the ether, at a moment where, it could really register for people. I think maybe if it had come out before or after, it might not have. Who knows, right? Who knows? But it came out when it needed to come out is how I'm thinking of it. And I feel like there's no better use of my time over this past year than to be, kind of banging people over the head with the importance of care for caregivers, and centering the people that we call essential workers, that everybody in the film is an essential worker. So for me, I'm there's no better use of my time. There's nobody that I would rather be in community and collaboration with, no cause that I care more about, than my sisters, and trying to get respect and care and some ease, for my folks. So yeah, I feel like you follow your purpose, cool things happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And I appreciate So much of what you shared, like around care and how like ideas around care have shifted because of the pandemic. And I definitely want to congratulate you for like having a vision and seeing it through. And I'm sure that your children are super proud of mommy, right?
They are. They be telling people that I'm famous, although I'm really not, but to them, they're like, you're here, the film's here, the film's there. I'm like, they're super proud.
Oh my God, I can imagine. They're like, mommy's a filmmaker. That's such a great feeling. It's such a great feeling when our children are proud of us. And it's like,
there's nothing there's nothing like it, nothing like
oh,
it.
you like me. It's just so funny. This is a kind of a weird tangent, but the other day, my daughter and I were talking, and I was like, she was like, Mom, you know what? I love you, but I like you too. And I was like, oh, you like me?
There's a difference. There is a
difference, right? I was like, okay, like you would hang out with me.
Exactly. Like you cool people. Yeah, like I see you. We tribe.
I just felt like I won a prize. I was like floating all day.
You winning, mommy. You winning, mama.
Oh my goodness. All right. So I just have 2 questions left and then we will be done. The first one is, and it feels like an obligatory question. You don't necessarily have to answer it, but I'm also curious, like next documentaries coming up, if there's things brewing that people should look out for, maybe that you need support for, if there's, someone out there who's like an intern or wants to work in documentary, like, and they want to work with you, are there opportunities for that? Like what's coming up next for you, basically?
Yeah. So the big thing, this is gonna sound crazy, but like the big thing for me, well, couple big things that happened with this film is that one, I kind of like convinced myself that I'm actually a filmmaker. I had doubts, about whether or not I was a real filmmaker or not. And now I'm like, no, I am a filmmaker. Yes, I am owning it,
Films.
Yeah, I'm owning it. And I want to keep making films, which, is not like a given because it's hard to fundraise for films and they take so much time. And I got these 2 kids that they like to eat every day. I don't know where they got the crazy idea that you're supposed to eat every day, but that's their expectation of me, that I'm going to feed them every day. So that requires money. So there's a bit of a dance there for me that I need to figure out because I don't want another 10, 12 years to pass between my films. I want to be able to continue creating. So I'm trying to figure that out. I have multiple film ideas. Definitely have a couple more films in me about motherhood and labor and work. I would love to tell a story at some point about Black immigrant women who work in the United States, like on work visas and are, mothering and sort of kind of.
Oh, that story. Yes.
Half the year here, half the year at home. And like, what does motherhood, look like in that kind of configuration? And also just because I think we need a lot more stories about Black immigrants to round out the conversation about immigration in the United States. So there's that and a couple other things, but I think everything with me for a while, at least, is going to be, through the lens of like class and race and gender, and like the experiences of poor and working class women of color.
Awesome. So my last question is the question I always like to ask everyone that I talk to, which is when it comes to books and reading, can you give us a couple of book titles, books written by Black women from anywhere in the diaspora that you feel influence your creative praxis, your life movement, your mothering, your ideas, just as far as suggestions?
Yeah, definitely Octavia Butler.
Okay.
I reread the Parable books this past year, and I feel like a lot of my framework around care, networks of care, family, and community are like, I think my values, what I believe is most important, are really like reflected in that book. So it was interesting to read them now. I had read them like years and years ago, and to like read them after I had made this film and I'd been thinking about care in this way, to kind of see so much of what I believe in this book. I'm like, oh, I guess maybe she like had already shaped me without me recognizing, you know. It's like
She shaped all of us, honey.
yeah, literally, right? Like literally.
She really did.
Yeah, like you know, I think to Toni Morrison, you know, like with Beloved, and like the, you know, the relationship of motherhood, you know, in the context of slavery and the kinds of choices, you know, like just thinking about motherhood in different contexts for Black women, and the kinds of impossible choices that we've been faced with, you know, time and time again. You know, and then I also, like, a couple years ago when the film came out about her, the Pieces I Am, the documentary about Toni Morrison, like being able to kind of see, like, she was a single mother to 2 boys who was working, supporting other writers of color, you know, which is like, that's my full-time job, you know, with filmmakers, you know, and then like over time carving out space for like her own craft and her own writing, you know. So both like her writing itself and then her life story are like these North Stars for me, of possibility. Yeah, so I say Octavia, Toni, who else? I'm gonna give you a third. That has been super. I would say Adrienne Maree Brown and her Emergent Strategy book.
I love Adrienne.
Also, in recent years, helped me a lot. Helped me both trying to figure out how to create a creative practice that was like iterative enough for me to be able to sustain it. In the context of being a full-time working single mom, you know, and a lot of those, like, you know, those tenets, right, like those principles served me and like helped me kind of move out of my blocks and my frustrations, because for a lot of the process of working on the film, I was yearning for that like idyllic artist retreat, you know, like you're in a cabin in the woods with a babbling brook, and then you wake up and inspiration just finds you. And like I made the film, you know, the company I used to make the film was called Third Shift Media, because I feel like I made it on my third shift. You know, I would work on it after the kids went to bed, you know, on weekends, on holidays. I would wake up really early in the morning. I would watch footage, get them ready for school, drop them off. And then like the ride to school, I'd be processing the footage that I watched and kind of jotting down notes to myself all over. It was like a very all over the place kind of process, because I had to fit it into a very busy life. And I was frustrated about that because I wanted to have a lot of time and space to create, and that never came. And at some point I had to understand that this is not my reality and adjust. And Emergent Strategy like really helped me along that, you know, journey. And even with my parenting, I would say like shifting my frameworks around like how I approach parenting and communication with my children, and like, you know, so I would say those 3 for now. I mean, there's lots of other people, but those are like the 3 that are coming top of mind.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, for your creativity, your artistry, your music. I still remember that iconic party at Sundance.
Oh yes, that's right. You were there.
You know what? That's the last time I was at a party.
Gosh.
That's the last time I was at a party, dancing with folks, feeling cute, flirting, having a little cocktail, all those things. That was the last, like, that was, yeah, because we came back from Sundance, and then it like the pandemic started, and partying felt like dangerous.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't been out dancing since. So
Oh, wow, that's
yeah,
great.
but
I'm
yeah.
glad that you at least had that in 2020. You had
Yeah.
at least one, you know,
Yeah.
experience, because man.
It was incredible. You're amazing. I just want to congratulate you again for your work, for making this film. Thank you for sharing the story of single mothers, Black single mothers, mothers of color, mothers who are out here doing the thing. Thank you for sharing like my story. Like I feel seen. And I appreciate that so much because that rarely happens in film. For me to like see my story in a film is like rarely happens. So I appreciate that. I'm glad that people are paying attention. I hope you get all the awards. And yeah, people can definitely check this film out. If you're watching this video, it's airing on PBS until June 9th. And then I'm sure it's going to be available in other formats and festivals and other spaces, but definitely check it out. And yeah, that's it. I think we're.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Ola. This is like medicine, you know, all like such good things. Thank you. Congratulations to you. I love, 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 love seeing like all the amazing things that you're doing. And like just thank you for loving us this much, you know, to create these kinds of spaces for us. You know, sometimes, you know, there's like the saying like, all we got is us. And I believe that to be true. But then I think like, that's not a bad thing. Like if
Really
all I got is other Black women, like I'm good with that, you know, I'm good with that. That's a whole lot, you know? And I feel like all of your work is like a living embodiment of that principle. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yay! All right. Bye, girl.
Bye. Have a good one.
You too.